so let's go back to the beginning. What got you involved with dogs, and what made you eventually a breeder?
I guess the story starts at birth. At the time I was born in Ketchikan, Alaska, to a 16-year-old single mother. So we lived with my grandmother, my mom's mom, and her husband at the time on Prince of Wales Island. And prior to them moving up there, she had purchased a half German Shepherd, half Rottweiler from somebody who did it was an intentional working breeding. Somebody out of Seattle. I don't know exactly who they were, what the background was, but they did that breeding on purpose. Mm-hmm. And from the time I was born, me and that dog were joined at the hip. So from 0 to 2, I definitely was connected at the hip with a kind of a high intensity guard dog, I guess. And whether or not I have a lot of memories, I definitely think that it informed and impacted me going forward.
Sure.
And then when I was a little older, living in Anchorage, Alaska, I'm probably 8 years old, my grandma imported a Rottweiler from Germany. And I was exposed to that dog, maybe even another level of quality and type of working dog. But from that point on, from seeing a high dollar, high value, very impressive, very intelligent, working type of dog, I wanted to have that in my life and wanted to breed them myself, I think probably from that age. I got my first dog at 11. The first dog that I would call my own dog, I paid for the dog. And after a lot of pushback from my grandmother and my mom, I was kind of raised by them jointly. They kind of had bought into all of the hyperbole surrounding the American Pit Bull Terrier in the 90s. And when I decided that was the dog that I wanted and that was the dog that impressed me the most, they shot all of those things at me about how unpredictable they are, and they turn on their owners, and their brains outgrow their skulls. I don't know. I heard every wives' tale inside my house about those dogs, but obviously I was seeing something different and refused to accept that as the end of everything. And so when I did get a dog, the dog was half Rottweiler, half American Pit Bull Terrier, backyard bred by somebody in my neighborhood in Anchorage, but it had the black and tan marking, so I was able to maybe pass it off to my grandma and my mom as a Rottweiler or some other type of Rottweiler mix, and so that was my first dog. And I did a lot of work with that dog. She was extremely smart, probably the best first dog you could ever have. And so I definitely wanted to be a breeder going forward. Obviously, a little bit of research would tell you that my mixed breed dog, wasn't going to be suitable. She died when she was 7. And so the next dog that I got was an ABA registered, dual registered, ABA UKC registered American Pit Bull Terrier. I was 16 years old, maybe 15 when I bought her actually, from a local guy in Spokane. That dog was pretty unremarkably bred. The top quarter had some good staff stuffs, Gaff, Lorum, Luna, some of the top names, but it was all down from a single dog that was up there in Spokane. And I think if you went back 5 generations on the extreme bottom corner, there was some real old family red nose back behind that. But other than that, it was mostly unidentifiable blood. But to me, it was definitely that dog was the nicest dog I'd ever seen, and her parents were the best looking dogs I'd ever seen. But I had only been exposed to like neighborhood American Pit Bull Terriers, if you will. I don't know how else to describe them, but just every random mixture of bloodlines and who knows what the genetics was behind them. And so to me, these dogs were definitely a head and shoulders above that experience, and that 8 generation pedigree gave me something to research, something to look at, something to learn from. I was never probably a very good student, but I would definitely call myself, when I'm interested in a subject, an obsessive researcher. So having that big extended pedigree to look at names, look up names, research, read, remember, definitely sparked something in me from a aspect of being able to manipulate bloodlines and blood percentage and genetics and recessive traits and dominant traits to make an impact on the dog that you're seeing. And from that moment on, for sure, that's something that I wanted to do. So I get to maybe a few months before my 17th birthday, and I'm looking for a male. So I would have a breeding pair. I'm looking for a registered male locally. Back then, there wasn't a lot of like, we're talking early 2000s, 01, 2, 3. It's not like you just got on Facebook and found, a million different dogs that fit the criteria that you have for sale from coast to coast. I was looking in the newspaper and stuff like that every week.
Oh, yeah.
There were very few in that area, like ADBA, registered kennels or anything like that. And so I was just in the newspaper. And one day I saw an ad, ADBA registered male American Pit Bull Terrier, 12 months old, 90 pounds. Now, even a big staff back then, the biggest dog that I had seen, staff blood, pit bull blood, however you want to call it, UKC staff was around 80 pounds personally. That was the biggest, and to my eye, that dog was enormous.
Mm-hmm.
So to see an ad in the paper locally, now I had been on the internet obviously researching every bloodline, and I knew of the existence of Chevy Red Dog and the existence of Whopper dogs, but had never seen one, never thought I would see one there locally at all, right? Mm. And so I called the number, and the price on the dog was like $150. And my first impression was that it's somebody is lying about the weight of the dog, which is very common still. And so I called the number, and the guy told me that this dog was the product of an accidental breeding. And so he accidentally produced this dog, and that the top side was Patrick Bullison and a Whopper dog, bred to a local staff, not dissimilar by accident, the male, not dissimilarly bred to the female that I had. Similar bloodlines. So I don't know why he had that dog on his property, whose it was, but that's what it was, and it was Jack Ellis. I don't know how well you know that name, but when you're talking about the history of what would be called the double XL bully today, or something along those lines, when you're talking about dogs like DDK9's the Holt,
right?
Jack Ellis is the originator and the architect of the bloodlines and the breedings that became that dog. That very much that dog would never have been produced. Whatever size he is, he wouldn't be that big if it wasn't for Jack Ellis and the work that he did. But at this time, that work was yet to be done, and Jack had just moved to Washington State from Oklahoma. Oklahoma is the homeland, if you will, of the Eddington Whopper bloodline. That's where Eddie Eddington lived and raised his dogs, and that's also where Darryl Spalding lived and raised his dogs, and that's where Jack Ellis was from. And I just happened to come in contact with him at that age through this ad in the paper. He ended up giving me this dog, but within 6 months of him giving me that dog, I sold both of the dogs that I had to purchase a purebred Chevy dog from Jack Ellis. So I got that dog, decided that the two dogs that I had were nothing like what I could be doing, and Jack definitely showed an interest in mentoring me at that young age. He was impressed that I even understood anything about the bloodlines he mentioned on the phone at that age. So I impressed him a little bit. He gave me the dog, and from there on, I had a working relationship with Jack Ellis going forward for the next 4 to 5 years. And that's where I began breeding dogs in earnest. At the time, they were registered as American Pit Bull Terriers with the ADBA. And the information that my mentor, gave me was that they were, the Chevy dog, Whopper dogs are legit. They're just, big lines of dogs bred to be bigger, and now they're getting really big really fast, and it's all legit, and there's no crossing going on. I definitely wasn't being told the truth that we know now, that those dogs were 100% mixed breed dogs. Probably the amount of Pit Bull Terrier in them would have been less than the amount of different Mastiff that was in them. And I'm sure I own dogs that had at least one that I'm suspicious of had hung papers on it that was either half or full, Dogo.
Right.
But without getting into details, looking back, we know the history of that bloodline and what went on there, more or less. The people that were actually there to witness the breedings and actually did the filing of the paperwork on them would maybe be the only ones that know the very specifics. But we know that those dogs are mastiffs mixed with American Pit Bull Terriers to whatever degree, one way or the other. But to me, they were the elite, biggest pit bulls in the country, in the world. And I was basically given access to, Jack Ellis's yard from the very beginning of his work with those dogs, to the degree that there are dogs on DDK9's the Holt, at least one that I know of, that I actually owned myself. I was the last owner of the dog. His name is Spalding's Like a Rock. He was a direct son of Chevy Red Dog that Jack had brought out, and he gave him to me as a gift. And the dog was 8 when I had him, and he lived for 2 more years, and I bred him twice while I had him. And that dog is on DDK9, the Holt's pedigree. So that's when, the breeding came into play for real. The exposure to the idea of working dogs. Whatever Jack was doing or whatever was done with those bloodlines that I spoke of at the time, it was very much with 2 purposes. Not just to create the biggest dog you could as fast as you could, but to produce a dog that was a big dog that could work as well. And there was a very strong connection with the breeding of those dogs going back to Eddie Eddington to weight pull competition, and the idea of doing breedings with a purpose, breeding dogs to work and do a specific thing, having a baseline of provability present in the dogs, meaning you can say that they're good to do a job, but also using the dogs for said job to prove their usefulness. Those ideas were given to me from Jack and being around the weight pull scene and these big dogs at that early time. And it's something that I believe the game in general has gone a long ways away from. And I believe that true working dogs for any working purpose of any kind are seriously under threat in this country, and that makes me sad. And so I'm here to try to do something about it now. One of the important things that I was involved in, and I'm proud to have been involved in, was the initial cross of the straight Chevy dog to the straight Camelot dog. And I got to a point where I had a good little yard with a handful of really nice dogs, but they were all really heavy on the Chevy stuff. I didn't really have much of an outcross present on my yard. Jack had used Castillo and a lot of Patrick Bullyson game bred dogs, primarily to that point. I wanted to maintain the red color of the Chevy dog. 2, I wanted to increase the drive of the Chevy dog. And 3, I wanted to lose as little size as possible when I brought in whatever I brought out. I wasn't necessarily pushing to make the biggest dog myself, but I didn't want the size to go too far below, the 100 to 125 pound side for the males. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to dip too far down below. Now, at that point, Jack already had produced a couple of dogs that were over 150 pounds and females that were 130 at that point. I wanted to produce a little bit more healthy dog, maybe a little bit smaller than where he was going, and a lot more drive. I was a kid, and I was obsessed with drive at that point. I wanted really big, really rough dogs. Mm-hmm. And whenever I told Jack I wanted to add something different than what we had been doing, or he had been doing, more or less, up to that point for the outcross, I told him what I wanted. And he had basically an encyclopedic knowledge of bloodlines. The first thing he threw out that met my criterion was Camelot. In the early 2000s, those dogs were extremely high drive for the most part. They were a pretty high drive dog. At that size, there wasn't anything like them, and capable. People can say... I've heard people say recently the Duke was a staff or whatever. I've seen no proof of this. The bloodline of Camelot, as represented by Art Sedaris, up until the point that I came in contact with him, was pretty commonly accepted to just be a heavy strain of the old family red nose. I hadn't heard anything back then about paper hanging accusations on that yard. And so from that point on, I wanted to secure a male that was pure Camelot, grandson at least, but double bred off of the Duke. And so at one point on my yard, I had King, who I got from a guy named, I can't remember his name. He operated Redskin Kennels in Omak, Washington. But I got a dog named King that was a son of Kenny Sonia's chief. I got a dog I named Ty that was off of a son of the Duke named Vampiro, owned by Ruben Pacheco in Denver, Colorado. And then through a deal that I did with Jack bought a bred female from a guy named Lamar Cook down in Arizona, who had a lot of Santos version of the Camelot blood, which was basically Camelot's the Duke Cajun stuff, line bred, and repeatedly bred back to pure old family red nose stuff. And so I got a male pick from a bred female that he bought from him. And I ended up only keeping one, and his name was, it was the one from Arizona, the one from the Santos stuff, and that litter was absolutely insane when we're talking about drive, and that's all that I was really interested in. He just happened to be a really, really, really good-looking dog, and so I had that dog, and I bred that dog to a female named Cheyenne, who was 4-time Chevy Red Dog in 5 generations, so pretty tight considering how new the bloodline was, and the male was 3 times the Duke in 4 generations, and so that was the first ever in the history pure 100% 50-50 Chevy 2 Camelot cross, and that was recreated by DDK9 with he used I believe a lot of Viet Shark stuff, but the breakdown on DDK9's The Holt is Chevy stuff through Jack Ellis's blood. I think there's a little bit of Razor's Edge mixed in, and then a lot of Viet Sharp, which is majority Camelot Peterson if you go back. So it's basically just kind of reworking that cross, about 10 years later. That's why I feel like I have a pretty good understanding of that dog, what he is, what his background is, even more than the individual who owns him.
Right.
But at the age of 20, quite as it kept, we need to get into too many details. I'm almost 21. I was involved in the streets as well as involved in dogs at the time, and I got in trouble, and I went to prison. Nothing insane, but enough to get me a 10-year sentence to serve, and I was young and dumb enough to extend that inside, doing dumb stuff in there. Again, no details. All told, I served 13 years in prison, and I was released about 6 years ago. I got married when I got out. And as soon as I was successful and stable in my career at the time, married, had a good place, and my feet were under me, immediately the itch to get a dog of some kind took hold. And I started, thinking and looking about what and where and how to, get my foot back in the door, doing something with dogs. I didn't necessarily want to do the same thing that I was doing before, more or less. A lot had been done with those dogs already. The ship had kind of been sailed, and trying to get hold of anything like what I had before wasn't really reasonable. I couldn't recreate what I was doing, and so I didn't even really kind of look in that direction at all. And getting big, high-intensity dogs, I have a 120-pound wife, and jumping out the gate and introducing her to living on a dog yard, with the biggest, most high-intensity dogs I could find, probably wasn't going to work anyways. So through my experience at weight pull events, working dogs, being at weight pulls, I came in contact with Johnson-type American Bulldogs for the first time when I was probably 17, 18 at a weight pull event. There was a kennel called Toxic Kennels, and they were out of Washington State, but I can't remember what part. And they had typically, I'd seen them only pull game-bred American Pit Bull Terriers in 30 to 45-pound weight class. And that day, they had a big Johnson-type American Bulldog. And to that point, my impression and my idea when you said American Bulldog was the dog from Homeward Bound, Chance from Homeward Bound. A longer-legged, larger, American Pit Bull Terrier, more or less, in my mind. That's what I pictured. I'd never seen a Johnson-type American Bulldog at that point. And I watched that dog, and that dog, Jack Ellis brought a dog named Jumbo Red Dog that pulled in the same weight class as him, and that dog was like a weight pull savant. and it wasn't expected, at least by me, to see a dog there at that particular pull that was going to push him in any way. But that American Bulldog, that Johnson-type American Bulldog that Toxic Kennels brought out that day, pulled 9,000 pounds on the track and pushed Jumbo for just about everything he had. And the thing that impressed me was that dog did not come off at all as a high drive, high energy dog in any way. He was very laid back, aloof, but very, very much a working dog. And that impressed on me the idea that high drive and workability aren't always mutually exclusive. Does that make sense? That they don't always have to be present in high levels for a dog to be able to do something. And I never forgot that, because that dog's disposition was very, very easygoing, very easy to handle compared to some of the dogs that we had. And he was doing the same work. And so when I went to get back into dogs, that's where I started looking. I started looking for, good Johnson-type American Bulldogs. I did a ton of research. It was probably a year and a half of research before I actually started reaching out to breeders. I was living in the Denver area at the time. And so there weren't really any breeders close to me. I got in touch with, by chance, Grant Harris at Bully Badass American Bulldogs, formerly of Copeland's American Bulldogs, and he's based out of Amarillo, Texas. And we started talking, and eventually I bought a dog from him, a male, Smudge. I named Smudge after the American Bulldog that I first came in contact with on the weight pull track in Washington State. That was his name. And from there, man, it's just been off to the races. We're probably 4 years in to our breeding program, almost three years in. Mm-hmm. We've had 2 litters of American Bulldogs to date. We're going to have probably 4 this year. But throughout that research period, before I actually bought a dog, or even started reaching out to breeders, I realized that there's the American Bulldog, the Johnson type specifically, or classic type. I don't want to get into what's a bloodline, what's a type, whatever. That's just force of habit. That they present a unique challenge. There is a lot of trend chasing in the breed that I can see being detrimental health-wise, much in the same way that the chasing of the extreme destroyed the American Bully, or at least certain versions of it. I can see some of that taking place in the Johnson-type American Bulldog. They do have joint issues. They can have serious breathing issues to the degree that they can die just being outside in extreme heat. And so there is a little bit of a unique opportunity as a breeder that maybe isn't present in every breed of dog, especially any breed that would be considered a working breed, to have a real and positive impact on the outcome as far as the classic type American Bulldog is concerned, and make a real impression for the better. It's still a relatively new breed. I mean, development started early development. We're talking about started on these dogs probably in the 1960s, late 1960s. And so they closed the books on F1s, I think, most registries, not until the early 90s. So to me, they represent, if you're just comparing to the American Pit Bull Terrier, a very new breed. And so there's still a lot of work to be done, and that can be done for better or worse with these dogs. And to me, that's a nice challenge. I would like to present or produce a version of the Johnson type American Bulldog that's functional, healthy, structurally sound, and functional enough not just to be outside in the heat, but to be outside, not in the extreme heat necessarily, but to be outside in the heat of the day and be able to enjoy itself. To be able to do the things that your average family might do on a summer day, go to the park, take a walk without the threat of death existing. And with these dogs bred in the extreme that direction, that's how dangerous it is. Some people, there are versions of these dogs out here that are almost like 100-pound version of an English bulldog, which is not a healthy thing at all.
Sure.
And so that's where we are with the American Bulldogs. I believe that the best way, going back to the idea of proving workability for these dogs, I intend to do the same, even though it's not the standard among breeders of the American Bulldog to prove any workability with their dogs before breeding them or anything like that. For me, it's a must, and so I will do it. And I believe that competition weight pull and with the right dog, protection work and bite work is the best way to prove the viability of these dogs, the task that I would most likely see people using them for. And so that's what we're going to do. Whenever I do have the right dog, not that every American Bulldog can do bite work, because it's definitely not the case, but I do have a strong belief that the right American Bulldog can be a very good personal protection animal. From a stability standpoint, they're super, super solid. And it's just a natural home guardian. I believe that they're probably the most stable natural home guardian of any breed that I've experienced so far as the ease of having them in the home and the natural tendency to confront. They're great. I have dogs here that have no training whatsoever that behave in a way that people pay thousands and thousands of dollars to have them trained to behave. So I certainly believe that they're a very viable dog for a first-time dog owner, but also a serious, home guardian at the same time, which is, you can't say that about a Belgian or a Corso or a Boerboel.
Right.
I've started, I know me and you've talked a little bit already, I've started kind of the research phase for a plan that I have for some Bandog production. Will I use these American Bulldogs in that? I do not know, but I do now have a pair of Boerboels. It's a breed that I've been fascinated with since I, first seen them on the internet. And, whatever plans I do have to do any kind of F1 crosses or Bandog production here, I want it to be done from a place of education and understanding. I don't think mixing breeds of dogs is something that you should just do. So I own these two Boerboels for the purpose of, learning and understanding the temperament, the physicality, what makes them tick, at least from the sample size of two. And same thing, I own two Corsos, female pup, she's just a baby, and a male that I imported from Serbia. Same thing, just to gather a good understanding, learn them. It's a dog that I've wanted to own as well for a very long time, and just see where, if they fit, while enjoying having them and doing some confirmation shows and some protection work and stuff like that with the dogs that show an aptitude in the meantime, just growing my skills and knowledge of the potential dogs that I may use, and just as a dog man in general, with going through the actual process of having a dog protection trained professionally and stuff for the first time, because it'll all be, all of that will be for the first time. It's something that I really wanted to get into for a long time, but the opportunity wasn't there, and now I'm in a position where I can do dogs full time and explore those aspects of working dogs that I've wanted to explore for my whole life, really.
Sure.
But that's where we are. We're in a position to do that. We'd like to produce, stable working dogs that can do whatever they're needed to do.
Right.
And I think it's going to start happening here real soon. I'm really excited about the stuff we have going on with the American Bulldogs right now. I love those dogs so much. They're so much fun to have. And we'll be out there. I got a weight pull track going in here in the next couple of weeks. Got all the stuff here and just got to get it installed, so we'll start training in earnest again. I've competed a bit in weight pull, but without having a cart or a track on site, it's really hard to finish your dog and get him, ready for serious high-level competition. Not that there's a ton of competition out there anymore, but there still is a healthy community, and I'm definitely going to get out there and get these guys to work.
Well, let me ask you this. When it comes to the Boerboels, what I was going to tell you before, so obviously, you know, there's a few different types. You know, there's some that are more Mastiff, some that are more Bulldog. Mine happens to be more of a Bulldog phenotype, and he actually kind of acts like an American Bulldog, if I say so myself. What your Boerboels? What would you consider them?
Well, I mean, I've heard the multiple different types. What are they called? You know, without getting, I would say my male Forest. He is a taller, longer-bodied, more athletic dog, but really large. I don't know what would you call that? The hound type, I guess. But man, he's got a lot of bone in him. I hate to call him a hound.
I'm pretty sure because Yoshi's mother.
And then the female is the more maybe more bully, girthier type. I would say, whichever you would call that, the bulldog, I guess.
Okay.
You've seen pictures. Would you agree with that?
I'm gonna go back and take another look. Yoshi's father is more the hound type, and his mother is the bulldog type. It was just crazy that he came out, you know, taking more after his mother. But definitely, I mean, he still resembles his dad in the face a bit, but definitely took on more of the what you would call bully or bulldog type, I suppose. I'll take another look at your photos, though, and I'm going to include them in the slideshow as well. I just wanted to know what your thoughts were on it. Now, as far as your Corsos are concerned, tell me why you decided to get into Corsos as well.
Well, so the Corso, during the time that I was away from dogs, the Corso went from being a dog that you probably don't see almost at all, really, in day-to-day life, at least where I lived, to being one of the, I think they're one of the top 10 most popular breeds in North America now, or close to it. And so there's been an extreme, swing in popularity. So my experience with the Corso had been kind of abstract up to recently, and the dogs that I had come in contact with up to that point had come across to me as fairly unstable. Skittish dogs, snappy, like I had that experience. And so my opinion of the Corso was that they were, you know, a fairly unstable, big, working dog that you might not necessarily just want to have in your house. But the experience that I had after I had seen a couple of more in the last few years kind of changed that opinion, and I come to realize, you know, through some research, it's not hard to see that they're known for stability. If you get a dog that's bred, you know, with some intention, they can definitely tend to stability issues if they're bred irresponsibly, for sure. But that's not the rule necessarily. Mm-hmm. I think they're the most beautiful dog, maybe aesthetically, that there is, personally. Mm-hmm. And so, them being a dog that I was interested in, and I think they're capable of doing a lot of different things, from protection to catch work, and those are things that I would like to explore. So they were a dog that had a lot of the traits that I was looking for, a lot of things that I liked, and I had a opinion that had gone from, you know, one extreme almost to the other, and I guess the only way for me to get by it was to own them and experience them and see if they are as advertised. And my experience since having, now my male is 13, 14 months old. I got him at 6 months old. I imported him from Serbia, like I said before. My experience with him has been excellent. Excellent. He's a very sharp, very stable dog, and he has enough drive to, I feel like, do multiple different things without being a hard dog to manage at all, if that makes sense. And sure. So my experience with them so far has been great, man. I really, 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 really like at least the Corsos that I've been around and had since I've been back involved with dogs closely.
Now, if you had to choose, just when you're using your imagination now, if you had to choose, as far as your Bandog ideas, would you go more with the Boerboel or the Corso?
So in my imagination, in my mind's eye, the dog that I would like to create with the Bandog production would maybe be a dog that's not as big as the Boerboel, and maybe one that's not as small or as slight in stature as the Corso. So to me, I would like to bring the capability of the Boerboel up, and bring forward the mind, athleticism, and add maybe a little bit more of a physically impressive aspect to the Corso. A dog that can really stop quickly a human. That would be the intention. But also potentially be able to catch. Now, the Boerboels, they definitely are tough. I've never felt a dog with a thicker hide than that male Boerboel I have. It's super thick.
Yes.
His bone is super heavy.
Yes.
He moves really well for a dog that's in the 160-pound range. I've never seen anything like it. But could he run through the woods in the heat of the day for miles? No. And that's not the purpose that those dogs were made for. But a Corso, on the other hand, absolutely they could, right? So I feel like bringing the physical capability of the Boerboel up and bringing the physicality of the Corso up would be the goal, and it would be somewhere in the middle.
So for a Bandog program, you're thinking of using the Boerboel and the Corso?
Potentially, but not necessarily.
Okay.
Yep, but not necessarily. The Boerboel, I'm 100%. I can't say enough about how impressed I am by those dogs.
Yeah,
I can't.
Yeah, I agree.
I can't. So there's no way that's not part of the foundation of it. No, but that's all I can say for sure at this point. I got a lot of ideas kicking around, but they all involve the Boerboel for sure.
Yeah, I agree 100%. That was actually kind of where my imagination took me. Was I love the look of the Boerboel. Personally, I'd like to scale it down just a bit. You know, I want to. Now, mine is not the biggest. He's, I don't know, maybe $110. But I know with his size and how heavy he is, he's not going to be able to scale a 6-foot fence for me. You know, if I really need him to. You know, I'd like to take it down to maybe. I'm just throwing numbers out there. I'll have to see it in front of me, but maybe like an 85-pound dog. Probably for a male, just something, but with that same look. You know, I love that look of the Boerboel, and I like the fact that they have the longer muzzle. A lot of them, you know, it's they can get more wind.
And they're just similar to the American Pit Bull Terrier in the sense that they're just a healthy, durable animal.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this guy will sit out in this. I live in South Carolina, and this guy will sit out in the sun and refuse to come in sometimes.
Like nothing. Yeah.
He just doesn't mind the heat.
That heat tolerance is. I mean, even dogs that are smaller don't have heat tolerance that's like that.
Right, and that was the main reason. I guess the look, the muzzle, and the heat tolerance was, you know, the reason why, you know, long ago I wanted to use the Boerboel when I first had the idea of a Bandog.
Yeah, I don't think there are many dogs out there that have the bred, the purpose-driven breeding that they have. There are a lot of dogs that have it far back in their history, but I think that the Boerboel may be the only modern dog, you know, bred with lions and hyenas in mind. and when you own one, you realize it's not just something that people say about the dog. You can see it.
Oh, and their pack mentality as well. Like my dog, he won't take, you know, he won't be bullied, but he'll hang out with another male. He doesn't have a problem with it. I mean, if there's a female in heat, obviously the smart thing to do is keep them separated. But outside of that, man, he loves running in a pack with other males, females. It doesn't matter. Like they like to. I mean, going back to lions and hyenas, right? I mean, it had to take 3, 4, 5 of them to actually go after one of these. So I mean, they had to be pack oriented, and that was another thing.
My male is very anti-male dog and
Really?
very anti-stranger. Very anti. Yeah.
Wow.
He's very territorial, but he's been raised. He was an adult almost when I got him, and he was up to the point that I got him. He was raised pretty hands off in the pen with only his female partner that I have here. So that may not have been the case had he been socialized the way that I would have done it from a young age.
Right.
But Canela, the female, is much more social and much more friendly. He's pretty he has bad intentions for for a lot of things. Definitely. He doesn't do other males, and he doesn't do strangers of any kind at all.
I gotcha.
But that doesn't bother me that much, to be honest with you. It doesn't bother me at all.
Right. I mean, I guess if I were to have my survival pack finished, I think I'd probably go with like 1 male and 3 females. Just to avoid
to keep
it.
things easier.
Yeah, just to keep
I
things
100%
easier.
agree.
So moving forward, I'll ask you a couple more basic questions. What's your feeding regimen look like?
Well, right now, I mean, my feeding regimen, I feed twice a day. It's good quality kibble, and 3 to 4 times a week we supplement raw, be it chicken livers. We have access to game carcasses, so sometimes we just chop up rib bones and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But man, it's just a good quality kibble with raw supplement multiple times a week. A lot of chicken here. It's what we can afford to feed.
Right,
A lot of chicken. I'm looking into getting into raising meat rabbits, both for me and the dogs, actually. Somebody told me that that's the most economical way to produce meat for your dogs is the rabbits, and I've always liked rabbit, actually. My wife is French, so she likes the idea, too.
I've never actually tried rabbit. What would you compare it to?
Man, I would say it's a rich dark meat chicken, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah. It's definitely, at least like when they're raised, I've never eaten like wild rabbits that you maybe hunt and kill and cook, but like meat, like farm raised for meat, it's a pretty rich meat, somewhere between dark meat chicken and pork, I guess.
Okay. That makes sense.
Somewhere in there. It's good though. I like it.
I've thought about that myself, as far as homesteading and trying to figure out what would be the cheapest but still, nutritional way to feed myself and the animals.
Yeah, they say it's one of the most efficient ways to produce protein.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I'm going to try it. My grandma did it when I was younger, so I've seen it. I know what it looks like.
And where are you located right now? Where are you located?
It ain't cheap to feed these beasts, man.
Yeah. And
Dog food ain't cheap. We got to do something.
And where are you located again?
South Central Missouri. Just Mountain Grove, Missouri.
Okay. Have you ever experienced in any of your dogs? Have you ever experienced any hip or joint issues with their size?
Not the dogs that I have. No, even the dogs I had before, I never. I know that it happened, but with the dogs that I personally experienced, the Chevy dogs, the Camelot stuff, I never experienced any hip failure in those dogs, and I've never experienced any hip failure with the dogs that I have now. But I researched my pedigrees. I know there's no failed hips anywhere in the pedigrees either. Not every dog is pen hip tested, but there's no failed hips anywhere. And there's a lot of testing behind these dogs. And with the Bulldogs, I definitely think, obviously with the Corsos, it's something that you really, really want to do. I don't know how common hip genetic failure is in those dogs. With the American Bulldogs, I haven't experienced it. I know that it exists, but my dogs come from healthy hips, so I haven't experienced, anything like that with these dogs yet. We're going to start probably doing more hit testing just going forward, because I like to maintain, maybe not every dog, every generation, but I definitely like to maintain a history of joint testing on the dog. So
now
just to make sure you're not straying away from the healthy hips at all,
Right, yeah, every few generations it's a good idea. But let me ask you this. Is there any breed of dog right now not on your yard that you're interested in and actually want to get a hold of?
100%. I have a thing for the dogo. I would really, really like to see what those dogs are all about. And this one, I'm probably going to pull the trigger on this one. I don't know if you're familiar with the Jag Terrier.
Oh, love them. Absolutely.
I've been in love with those dogs since the first time I saw one when I was a kid.
They're insane.
And they'd be extremely useful for some of the stuff I want to do going forward with dogs. I may get into hunting with dogs on a more serious level also.
Sure. Yeah.
But for sure those two.
Yeah, I like the Jag Terriers. I like the Patterdales. But it's, for me, it's, I've always thought, like, man, they're almost like miniature pit bull terriers, like.
Very much, yeah.
And they got all the heart in the world.
A very high level compliment.
Yeah, they got all the heart.
That's what it definitely, and that's what I thought about the Jag Terriers. But the dog aggression isn't. Some of them are very dog aggressive, but it's not as present.
Mm-hmm.
It's not as common necessarily. You can have pairs that get along, and you can have dogs that obviously they need to be able to hunt with other dogs. But the overall drive and tenacity is through the roof, and they're extremely durable and punch way above their weight class, And I'd like to weight pull with one of them and hunt as well.
Oh, man,
same with the dogo. Their potential as like a protection dog or a working hunting dog, the fact that they have the ability to really go both ways, or at least that's what my research is telling me, is fairly unique. Mm-hmm. And I go back and forth about the Presa, but my evaluation of the Presa is that it's just a more highly driven Corso, maybe, more or less. I'm not trying to insult anybody or down anything, but like that's more or less my impression. Very similar dog with a very similar genetic background.
I've been hearing a lot of different. Back and forth on the Presa. In fact, a friend of mine I did a couple interviews with like last month is set in his ways. Now I'm interviewing this other guy later tonight, and he's completely set in another way when it comes to the Presas, and so this is going to be interesting. Cause,
I'd definitely be tuning in.
Yeah, I want to see. I want to see what the outcome is, because they're both set in their ways, and then if it comes down to it, I mean, hell, I might just say, why don't you both jump on a live or something, and
talk about it.
Yeah, because that's where we really get to the meat and potatoes.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely.